Hello. Were you always there? I forgot to put anything on the extra deck. My bad. Fuck. I'm just gonna go ahead and restart. Sak. I don't know where I'm going with this.
Didn't exactly make people a bit more at ease. People were concerned, and a discussion around banning the character was slowly being taken a lot more seriously. At this point, Steve really was without a shadow of a doubt the best character in the game, and maybe even a bit of a problem for the community to figure out. There was of course still a lot to be learned about the character, lots of matchup experience to gain, and character knowledge to understand. Steve was here to stay, and he would only gain more popularity and infamy as time went by. The rest of Steve's moveset is, while not as outwardly powerful as previously discussed moves, are still very good in their own right, and we'll be taking a look at the rest of them now, but I obviously don't have as much to say about them as the previous moves. There's stuff to say here for sure, but a lot of these moves can just kind of be encapsulated by just one idea, which really is another one of the backbones of why this character is so good, that being the concept of diamonds and diamond tools, which leads us into crafting as a whole. Crafting allows you when at a crafting table to change your tools into the highest value resource you currently have. All the 5 different tools have different durability and damage multipliers. As you could expect, wood is the weakest, followed up by stone, then iron, and finally diamond being the strongest. Gold is the same strength as wood, however gold also makes your moves come out a little bit faster, so there's that to consider as well. Generally speaking, stone gives all moves that use the tools a 1.1 damage multiplier, iron gives a 1.2, and diamond has an absurd 1.35 times damage multiplier. We'll see to what extent diamond tools affect these moves in due time, don't worry. You have to be at a crafting table to be able to craft tools, which is not much of a drawback since you can just summon it to your position. Alternatively, it will just respawn after a few seconds if destroyed. If a tool breaks, like a diamond pickaxe, and you craft a new one of a lower tier, the other tools are not replaced. It always leaves the higher tier tools. Besides that, crafting is pretty simple. Diamond tools take a little bit longer to craft than the other ones, which all share at the same time. If you're a fast character, you can actually push Steve away from the table and cancel the craft, which is very funny, but don't get too comfortable doing it. Diamond tools are, how should I say this? Like, just extremely overpowered. Like, it adds a 1.35 times damage multiplier to all of Steve's attack that use the tools, which is a massive increase over the next best thing, being 1.2 from iron tools. Like, we'll see, this causes some moves to become very disproportionately strong, kinda like in the case with Anvil earlier, since the knockback is not really compensated for the extra damage it now deals. I've already mentioned that there are a lot of characters that exist in varying states of strength. Sometimes characters are able to become more powerful for a short while, and some other characters get more options after a certain percentage is met. This is a very important balance to keep in line. These opportunities never come for free. Aura needs Lucario to be badly damaged to get those crazy early stocks. Mac has to get hurt a bunch to get KO Punch, and if he misses, it's not gonna end well for him. And both characters have other aspects that bring them down as well. Aura actually makes Lucario weaker before he gets to a certain damage threshold, so while it can be beneficial for you, it's also holding you back to a certain degree. There is always a condition that needs to be met or worked around, some price to be paid to get the reward. That's kind of what inherently keeps the balance of these characters in check. If these characters always had access to these tools, that would be pretty crazy, I think you would agree. But that's also what justifies the developers giving these characters these tools in the first place, which leads me to how diamonds are implemented in this game, and why I think it's not exactly great. As you probably know, Steve starts out with wooden tools. This is the baseline, and anything better in terms of quality adds a different damage multiplier on top of the base damage, gold being the only exception as I mentioned. On paper, this is a perfectly fine way to balance diamond tools. They are super powerful, but Steve needs to mine to find them. meaning he won't have access to them at the start of the stock. Which seems fair, right? You got your little condition and reward game, so what's the problem? Well, let's look away from the fact that having to mine is not really a cost, as discussed earlier, which, I mean, does kind of defeat the purpose of it a little bit. But the huge thing I think that makes diamond tools as strong as they are is just the fact that you can carry diamonds from one stock to another. Imagine if other characters like Joker can do something like this. Once Arsene triggers, he has the opportunity to just hang on to it and use it whenever he wants. Maybe he's close to losing his stock, so he'll just save it for the next one. And he could somehow store several Arsenes. But no, it's something that not only needs to be worked up to during the match, but you also have to capitalize on it when it triggers. It creates a sense of urgency for both players. When you play against him, you want it to go away as soon as possible, while Joker wants to get as much out of it as he can. There's many ways to get rid of it. You can play passively and wait until the timer runs out, or you can be more aggressive and try to hurt Joker, so the meter depletes faster. Regardless of how it goes, Arsene is a very dynamic mechanic, largely because you don't have complete control over when it triggers. Steve, on the other hand, has complete control over diamonds, which leads to basically the same play pattern every time. Steve will try their best to get a diamond on the first stock, likely take too much damage to make it worth using then, but if you don't take too much damage, you make the tools then and there, and from there they will basically have guaranteed diamond tools on the next two stocks. And there's very little you can do about it, besides trying to stop Steve from mining in the first place, which is just the status quo anyways. Once he has them, it's basically just a permanent upgrade to the character, which again is basically a trait exclusive to Steve. No other character in this game can just become permanently better for doing a certain thing. It's always temporary. I guess you could argue that diamond tools do break, which is true of course. However, it does take a lot for that to happen. And if you manage to break them, you probably got some good value out of them anyways, or likely another diamond to replace it. It basically just comes back to the main issue with mining as a whole, but diamonds working the way they do just kind of exacerbates the issue. If it couldn't carry them over between stocks, I think the mechanic would be quite fair actually. Maybe you could do it so they appear a little bit earlier, but it would lose the ability to cruise 2 out of 3 stocks with almost guaranteed diamond tools. You probably wouldn't be able to get them until you had at least double the damage to him, meaning he also would have less time to use them. There's probably tons of ways to fix this. But I guess the core of the issue really is just that diamond tools are a little too strong for how little effort it takes to get them. Going forwards, I'm going to be talking about the diamond versions of attacks mainly, because that's what Steve is going to be having most of the time realistically, and it's really where the moves start being problematic. Some of them are just really good on their own though, even without diamond. And no move is a better example of this than back air. Back air might seem on paper like one of his less outrageous moves, but I still think it's probably one of the most addictive moves of how strong Steve is as a character. It's just a classic, straight up, really strong move. No wacky projectiles, no funny block combos. No, this is just a really good move in the most basic way possible, worthy of a triple S rank. It's safe, strong, and stupidly big. The move is admittedly a little strange in how it works. The hitbox looks like this, and as you can see, it's pretty huge. Steve swings his pickaxe behind him, and the move is actually weaker on the first 2 frames, and stronger on the last 3 ones. To start off, the move auto-cancels on short hop, meaning you can put out this massive attack with little risk of getting punished for it. Even if you just recklessly throw this around, it's only -6 on shield, which is very safe for a move that is this strong. However, the main issue here really is just how grossly overpowered the move is, and I mean that in the pure literal sense, like the move is just too juiced up. It's the problem with diamond tools that we'll see a lot more of as we go through these moves. Even on stage normally, the move just KOs way too early, and if you land it higher up close to the blast zones, you can just delete stocks way ahead of schedule. So remember when we talked about down air and how it can sometimes launch the other way than you would first think? Well, back air has that as well. You see, for some reason they decided that the 2 hitboxes on back air should launch at different angles. One that launches to the side and one that launches more upwards. This is very rare actually, since most single hit moves with several hitboxes only tend to launch a single direction. Kinda specifically to make things like this not happen. When you give a move 2 fairly different angles to launch at, without compensating for the damage, that causes some problems. I think the reason they did this is because they wanted to give back air a sour spot, but didn't want to make the move deal less damage, which is usually how they go about doing that 99% of the time. And on paper this does work. The sour spot angle makes you live longer in most circumstances, since it launches at a better angle for survival. Once again though, I don't think they accounted for the fact that people were going to be landing this move far up into the air. I think they banked on the fact that Steve has very bad jump height, and would likely never get that far into the air, unless he built a little tower for himself like a fair Minecrafter. If you get comboed into the air with uptilts like this, there's a fair chance that Steve can follow up with a back air, in which case, combined with the disproportionate knockback of diamond tools, you may get launched and KO'd off the top of the screen, if you get hit by the sour spot angle. This, once again, is avoidable by DI, if you know which hitbox you're getting hit by. Once again, we have the dichotomy where if you DI optimally, accounting for the sweet spot, you may get hit by the sour spot, and suddenly that's now bad DI, and the other way around. I think it's a bit silly that this is a thing, but I don't really think it's a huge deal overall. If you just DI down, you'll be fine against the sour spot, and even though it's far from perfect DI against the sweet spot, it's still better than wrong DI or no DI. you kinda have to cut your losses in a situation like this, seeing how most of the time Steve is pretty close to you after doing a ladder like this, and will likely land the sour spot anyways. You're better off just DIing down to be safe. And if it still KOs you off the side, at least you avoided being the top clip on Twitter that day. It's another case of the numbers being pushed a little too hard, and we end up with a move that KOs quite disproportionately early in some cases. It combos very nicely with a lot of Steve's panic options as well, being the perfect move to throw out after a minecart or down air, covering a lot of area in the process. This is a good time to bring up another thing Steve has, that being short hop macros. If you input a back air or forward air while short hopping, you'll get a move that looks like a variation of jab, which is a quick sword swing in front of or behind Steve. This is yet another thing Steve just gets to have, and in these cases it actually helps him out a lot. These moves are really fast out of shield. They come out on frame 7, which is not really close to the fastest in the game. That honor goes to this monstrosity, but 7 is still really good. It's the same frame as Cloud's uppy out of shield, so if you think that move is quick, these are just as fast. These little moves might seem innocent enough, but they're a lot better than you think. For one, they actually give Steve a quick way to punish effortless attacks on his shield. The hitboxes are not massive, but good enough to punish most attacks close by. Without these, pressuring Steve's shield would be a lot easier, which is probably why it would have been a good idea to not make him have this. They also happen to combo into forward air and back air at early percentages, and sometimes later if they DI correctly. This is a bit unnecessary to say the least. I mean, these moves are already excessive enough. It's not like it's a major aspect of the character, but I feel like Steve has enough going for him that maybe we could have cut these. I guess they felt bad that jab and up tilt ate up so many moves being combined like this, resulting in less unique moves overall, but they already compensated for that by making them really good moves, with you being able to move around and stuff while using them. I guess they thought it would not be quite enough, or maybe they thought that Steve would be too helpless if he didn't have any fast out of shield options. I mean, it kind of would make sense for Steve's out of shield game to be slow. For whatever reason they decided to add these moves. It's definitely just another layer of flossing on this already very excessive cake. Since we're already on the topic, I guess we should talk about forward air as well. This move is a lot like back air, being a pickaxe swing downwards. However, the most notable and infamous part of this move is the fact that there's a spike on the later part of this move. This enables a whole bunch of combos that the character has no business doing. You can basically extend any combo by doing a forward air, since the hit stun from the spike will keep them in place, and since it launches you directly down, you always have your opponent where you want them, which can lead to even more combos or maybe even another forward air. The way this move allows for combos like this is very strong. I don't really know if they intended for it to be as good as it is. I mean, surely they must have, right? Since down throw to forward air seems like the most intentionally set up combo of all time. Jab helps a lot in these combos as well, having just the perfect knockback to land a spiking part of the move. The whole combo usually won't end with you losing a stock, unless they manage to link an up tilt into it or something. But the amount of damage that even just a normal forward air does is so high when you have diamond tools. Outside of combos and strings, the move is pretty useful all around. It's fast and powerful. The hitbox not too half bad either. Oh yeah, and it's also the reason why if you get hit by minecart and fall off stage, you're basically done for. These moves were basically designed for each other. The whole idea of putting a spike on a forward air like this was maybe not the best. Of course, there's a lot of moves that are spikes that are not down airs, but I usually feel like they're a little bit more careful when implementing them. Most of them don't lead to scenarios like this where you can do combos, for example. The move usually doesn't come up too much outside of these two situations though. Two situations which I might add come up quite often. Overall, the move really is fine, but it just happens to be a very critical part of C's combo game. And those combos can easily deal around 40 to 60% without much problem, and with very little counterplay, so it's definitely a very strong move in that sense. Steve's grab is a bit of a strange case in my eyes. In one way, having a slow, long-range grab makes the character not as good at dealing with shields as it would be otherwise, but in this game, normal grab stocks are at an all-time low anyways, so it's not like he's missing out too much. If he had a normal grab, it would likely be one of those really slow ones like Belmont's or something, in which case having a long-range grab is basically always better. As it stands, I think he benefits a lot more from having a so much slower grab with more range than one with bad range and pretty mediocre lag. If you compare the move to some of these slower grabs in the game, it really isn't even that much slower. It only has like a little bit more end lag afterwards. So I think the grab is actually really solid given the circumstances. His throws are all really messed up as well. His down throw, despite actually needing an iron to use, deals a massive 18% damage and leads directly into the combo I was talking about earlier, involving forward air and jab and stuff. Again, the mentality that as long as it costs just one iron, I guess we can just make any move be totally absurd seems to be alive and well. Back and forward throw are fairly unremarkable. Back throw can be used to stage spike opponents if you place a block in this specific spot and land a grab. Forward throw launches at a very sharp angle, which can give some characters a hard time recovering, but it shouldn't make too huge of a difference. Up throw, regrettably, is pretty strong. You can KO with it at around 130 to 160%, depending on weight and range, which might not sound too impressive, but having a throw that KOs at all is a very underrated privilege that not every character has, especially seeing how it's an up throw and therefore does not care about stage positioning either. You'd be surprised by how nice it is to just be able to land a grab and press a single button to close out a stock, especially when you can do it at the same percent regardless of positioning. It keeps the opponents from just comfortably staying in shield when they're scared. All in all, his grabs and throws are really solid. Steve's jab functions pretty much like Mega Man's, in the sense that it doubles, or shall I say triples, as a jab, for tilt and neutral air. The move may seem really mundane at first glance, and by most accounts it is. It's a simple sword swing in front of Steve. However, it's quite fast, and seeing how he can actually move while using it, it ends up having a lot of utility much like up tilt does. It's fairly good just on its own, being fast and relatively safe since you can retreat while using it. However, it really shines as a combo extender. Like I mentioned, a single jab can often lead into a forward air which spikes
Yeah, I'm
it
an
down,
idiot.
which again can be followed up with another move. You can even combo into forward smash for some really dangerous combos. It's the glue that keeps the horizontal combo game together. So while it's not the most impressive thing just on the face of it, its utility should not be underestimated. There's also the matter of how the move interacts with fast fallers and characters with high gravity. You've probably seen clips like this before, where Steve just carries an opponent across the whole stage using jab, which of course is very silly. Since the move doesn't put the character into tumble until higher percentages, this can very easily happen on characters that are not very floaty. You can of course have this happen to you to some extent if you're not a fast faller, but in those cases escaping is a lot easier, as long as you don't just put down the controller. I do find it a little ironic that this worked especially good on Fox, seeing how back in Smash 4 he had a very similar thing going on with his jab, although that was patched out at some point. Jab is a really good move. Having a quick move that is as fast as jab, and has way more reach than the average one, really helps Steve with his otherwise slow out of shield game, if the macros didn't do a good enough job of that already. Elytra is Steve's up B, and you may be asking, what could possibly be wrong with such a seemingly simple recovery move? And I mean, not too much. If by not too much, I mean everything. Okay, in all fairness, this move is not really problematic in any way inherently. However, when up against all the other amazing tools Steve has, it feels like such a huge overindulgence. It's an extremely good recovery move. It brings back the gliding mechanic from Brawl, and just like they did back then, they managed to stick it on one of the strongest characters in the game. It's almost like having a gliding recovery is actually really good, and makes the character better, or something. The move is probably one of the best recoveries in the entire game, and while it might lack some onstage utility, in the way some other recoveries do, even though it somehow manages to still have some of that, it still exists as one of the cleanest recovery moves in the game, being very flexible and hard to intercept. Usually in Smash when they design characters that are slow in the air, the recoveries tend to reflect that. Either they don't go too far, or they're kind of inherently held back by the fact that the character's bad airspeed will not really get them into a good position after they get launched too far. As mentioned, Steve is very slow in the air, so you would imagine that they made a recovery that would reflect that. But no. Elytra is basically tailor-made to once again undermine one of Steve's weaknesses, giving him a huge amount of freedom in how he wants to recover. Seeing how it has the gliding mechanic, it can be very hard to catch Steve when he's recovering, since he has a ton of different ways he can mix up his recovery. The move does have a hitbox, but it's so small to the point where you're likely not going to get hit by it. Despite the hitbox being small, it can still be very hard to actually hit Steve. This is because of Steve's hurtbox shifting to be a lot more horizontal. A hurtbox that, if I can take a second to talk about it, is also a very generous aspect of the character. Many characters in this game have huge, bulky hurtboxes that are much bigger than their actual bodies. Steve's body being composed of squares, and hurtboxes being made up of circles, meant that they went for the same route as they did with blocks, and made the circles a little bit smaller than the blocks making up his body, resulting in him having a smaller than usual hurtbox, or at least one that's a lot more compact than other characters. Like, just look at Richter here and his phantom forehead sticking out of his shield and stuff. Steve definitely doesn't have to worry about things like that. This is not a big deal or anything, but yet another favor that's bent to Steve's will. It makes him very hard to hit, and even then he can easily just fly or delay the recovery, either after using it or before. A majority of recoveries in this game don't get to have the luxury of being this flexible. A lot of characters have to recover when you have the chance to make it back. Most recoveries like this are static and have a very fixed pattern after you use them. On some moves you might be able to influence the angle of the recovery a little bit, which can be useful of course, while some just fly straight up into the air, with maybe some minor drift to the side. Almost universally, you want to grab the ledge from below. This is generally the safest. However, if you want to do that, seeing how a lot of recoveries are very fixed in how far they go, you basically have to make it to the same spot off stage every time, and then use the recovery move. This makes some recoveries predictable and easy to intercept. If you know what kind of recovery your opponent has, you know they can't make it back unless they make it to that specific spot. Covering that spot with an aerial is a solid way to edgeguard. This is of course countered by predicting your opponents will try to do this and making an early recovery, which is more risky since you probably won't snap ledge the same way. This is of course a bit of a simplification. Some characters even have several special moves to recover with, which makes things a lot more complicated. But I just wanted to underline how Steve basically never has to worry about any of this, being able to fire this off at almost any point. The move not just having the reach to make it back from anywhere, but could also make a path that's really tricky to intercept, making it really difficult to account for the timings he can use. Oftentimes you're better off not even trying. Like, it's amazing how much distance you can really get out of this move. The final straw that really puts this move into the true privileged top tier category is the fact that, the move literally has its own ledge grab hitbox that's way bigger than any other character in the game. Like, if that's not literal privilege, I don't know what is. It's a massive ledge grab hitbox, which is made specifically for Steve when he's using this move. Otherwise he uses this one, which is his normal ledge grab range. Nearly every character in the game uses their regular ledge grab hitbox for detecting ledge when using their up Bs, and some of them can be really strict sometimes. Meanwhile, Steve over here gets to have like 3 Steve's worth of ledge grab disjoint. making him able to grab it from way below ledge if he wants to. It's a little absurd. I feel like the potency of Steve's recovery is likely one of the most overlooked points when talking about him. If he had an actual bad recovery, or even a mediocre one, I feel the character would have been a lot easier to deal with. If you overextend off stage while trying to hit him, he'll get back for sure, so the risk is not usually worth it. Because even if you do hit him, unless it KOs, he'll likely make it back no problem, with the combination of the extra jump for minecart and Elytra alone. While it's fine for certain characters to have recoveries like this, I think Steve is just one of those characters that does not deserve to have it. Yet, here we are. I do also find it a little strange that despite being a very resource-intensive thing in actual Minecraft, it spends no resources at all in Smash. It's all on the house. If it actually needed some kind of resource, even if it was just dirt or redstone or something like that, it would go a long way to not only balance the recovery, but also be a good way to make Steve bleed a little bit more during his disadvantage state. It's not like there aren't already characters that need a certain resource to be able to recover, and I feel like it would have been a good fit for Steve to have something like that. Like imagine if the move worked like Minecart, where you had a much slower version of the move if you had no redstone,
there she
and with
is.
redstone when it was fast and unpredictable like it is now, you'd have to be a little bit more careful when using its resources, mainly the power minecarts, which I genuinely think would be a good way to make the character feel a little bit more helpless off stage. You would have to balance your offense and defense a little bit more. If you spent more redstone using your minecart, you might leave yourself more vulnerable off stage, if they don't get hit by it. In a way, it could make for some fun, dynamic gameplay. TNT is one of those really weird moves that, despite being pretty complicated in how it works, I really don't have much to say about. I have yet to really see this move be used all that effectively. It seems like something Steve players just kind of throw out when they want to freak out their opponents a little bit. Steve places down TNT and it acts like a block on the ground. TNT takes up 50 points worth of value from the meter, which is actually quite a lot. You then have the option to spend some redstone and make a trail with a pressure plate at the end. If anyone steps on the plate, the TNT will explode. If you hit the TNT before this, it'll start counting down and explode on its own, at which point you can no longer detonate it by the plate. Which I have to say, the way they decided to do the TNT flash is just so bizarre. It flickers normally for so long, before very quickly flashing faster and then exploding. Feels like it should slowly start flickering faster and faster at a constant rate, right? So you actually know when it's gonna explode for sure. It always feels like it's going to blow up way earlier than it actually does. I guess there's not really a problem with that, but I've always just kind of found